Hey everyone, Ekman here with another video, and today we have our essentially first big week for the OP07 version of One Piece for the English version of the card game. We have a bunch of events going on in July, and this is also the store regional month, which means there's just a lot of these kind of smaller tournaments that, one, are going to be a little bit trickier for me to track down, but they're just going on a lot. So there's a lot of different events to kind of cover for that. And to put one more on your calendar, I am running my own event for OP07. It's going to be a case bounty. You can check the description for more information for that, but it's a 256 player cap. We do have 8 rounds of Swiss into top 16 cut, and it should be a really good time. So if you want to check out more information, check out the description. There's under 100 tickets left at this point in time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week as well. But for today's video, and there's going to just be a lot of preamble for this one, we're going over 3 store regionals that happen around the United States. We also do have the No Heroes regionals that happened in Germany this past weekend. I did end up doing a video for their YouTube channel in specific, so if you guys want to check out my full breakdown, you can check it out on their YouTube, which is linked in the description as well. And but all of these are going to be on my website. We're going to have a lot of events to go over for this, and chances are between me dropping this video and recording it, there will be more events that I put up here. So again, there's more of these community sized events that are just continuing to pop up, and because of that, there's no real regionals for North America until August, which is a bit of a weird Wild West kind of situation. So, and if you guys don't know what the store regionals are in general, they are 64 player cap events. They are Swiss best of 1/6 rounds, generally, at least until one undefeated, and that's it. So these are also lottery based events to get on into. So it's not necessarily like a top 64 players in the area kind of thing, or even like first come first serve. It is more lottery based. So what that just kind of means is that the skill level kind of varies, I think, a little bit more compared to the larger events on people who got into these, and that's kind of impactful for these. And again, they're only 64 players, which is still a sizable amount of players, but I do think that it is a bit of like a results may vary, right? These are just kind of like mega locals if you want to go into it. So with that aside, I do think that it is a very big accomplishment to win these events. There are just like some, and these are not treated equal, right? There are some like maybe areas where there just happens to be a higher cluster of people who are high skill players who got in for these too. So I do think this is a very diverse meta, and we're going to see a lot of different leaders topping for this one. For example, the core one, and but again, this is going to be a bit of results may vary. Take it with a grain of salt for some of these lists, but I do think that there are some really good lists in these bundles too. So we're going to go over a couple of lists from these ones. We can't go through all of them, obviously, but we're going to try my best to go over as many as I can. And then last thing before we actually jump into this video is that I was able to live stream the core TCG one with Strongest Wizard as well. So if you guys want to check that out, that is linked in the description as well as on this page for it. It's free to watch. I put it free to watch on YouTube so you guys can check out the content. It was a lot of fun, and I really do appreciate core TCG letting me do it. It was a really good tournament as well. So that all aside, we are going to go over topping leaders from each one of these events. They're going to be a little bit random. We're going to go over the winners for each one, and then a couple other ones as well, but we do have quite a variety of leaders and decks to go over. So lastly, again, I'll say it one more time, if you want any of these deck lists, they're going to be on eggmanevents.com, which you can check in the description. If you want a full breakdown of the No Heroes one, it is on their YouTube channel, and you can check that out. But we will be going over the first place list for the No Heroes one, which is George's version of the red-green law. So I almost said red-purple law just out of habit lately, but this is the older leader, and if you are newer to this card game, you might not be aware of how good this leader was for the first 4 sets of the card game. It had just amount of value that you couldn't really interact with. We didn't have as much card removal as we do right now, and because of that, he really thrived from playing all these 1s and 2 costs that were able to regenerate value, such as like Curly to Dan being able to draw a 1 cost, which could be a Nami, which could then find sidline any of your cards, right? So I think that's really impactful for the deck. So because of that, without like a Sakazuki, without 4-cost Rob Lucci, without a lot of the removal cards that I think we're used to right now, Trafalgar Law used to be very, very strong in meta shattering in that way. But since then, since OP04, and again, it was relevant from OP01 to OP04, but OP05 Sakazuki came. It was very popular. It was able to get rid of, I think, a lot of Trafalgar Law players that were playing it, and I think a lot of them switched to Sakazuki of all things. But because of that, he's been kind of in the shadows. Red Purple Law got some fame just because it was more tempo based and more aggressive with it. But seeing this in this event and winning the entire thing is really, really impressive, right? We do get a couple of new tech cards from EBO1 and OP07. Specifically, we did get the Cavendish, which has been a stellar card in the game in general. Not only does Bonney take advantage of, but Trafalgar Law can as well, since we are a supernova leader, which is pretty good. We also do have like the 5-cost Bonney as well, and the Chopper from EBO1. This being a straw hat that's a blocker is really good. The fact that you can use it to attack into something and get that minus 3k power is strong for the card, and I think that's just what the deck needs. Just more copies of these 3-cost and like a good mix of like red and green cards. Generically, our low end is red, so then we can use our leader effect to bounce into like a higher cost green card, and that kind of works out for us. The last thing I'll say is that it's really surprising that we are seeing like 4 copies of Zoros, but no copies of Kid and Killer. I would expect that card to be a little bit more relevant due to the fact that it is a supernova and it's a card with rush, and it can be a 7k pretty easy. But I do understand like sometimes you just need like the lower cost. Zora is also a supernova card with rush too, so that's fills the same spot. The fact that it can be found off Bonney and our 1-drop Nami is fine, but it is a little peculiar that it's not there. I would say that would be a card I would think would be added, but I guess I understand why it was not either. So I think this is a really good deck. It's going to be interesting to see if Law is going to continue to be relevant in the next couple weeks, or if this was just the dream run for the deck. But it's a really big accomplishment. Congratulations to George for their finish with this one. And then next up we've got Nami. So this is Unlikely Heroes version of it that did win the core TCG store regionals that happened this weekend. So I think Nami was a deck that was understood as like a probably like tier 2 deck on release, right? We did have mostly like the Impel Down package. It wins occasionally, it tops occasionally, but no sense of consistency for it, right? Sometimes it runs very hot, it does very well, and it's based on how the meta is, right? If the meta ever gets too slow, which I think OP07 is approaching the slower side, Nami can really take advantage of some of those more grindy control and value decks if they don't set up quick enough. So the other thing is that we are running a new package from the Impel Down that we're used to, which is more of like the Amazon package. So this is a new archetype that came out with Boa in OP07. The key cards we want to talk about are like the Margaretti. Being able to be a blocker that draws a card is really nice. The Boa, just the Kuja Pirates, there's some synergy between the two. We have a Searcher as well, so that kind of takes advantage of not running like the 1-drop Buggy for Impel Down. And then we do have like the Snake Dance, which is a searchable card, which lets us bounce back our Kaya to hand and get like the additional draw, which is nice. And the Love Beam, which is also Kuja Pirate, so it's searchable as well. So I think this deck has gotten like a little bit more consistency with this package. It's very obnoxious if you are a slower deck, and outside of Red Purple Law, which I think is aggressive, is very good for putting bodies on board and can bottom deck cards to make your deck a little bit bigger. Nami has a moderately good spread in this meta, so probably approaching more of tier 1.5. I also think the deck gets a lot of advantage from your opponent maybe not knowing how to play against the deck perfectly, but I do think this is a relevant meta for Nami, and you definitely have to make sure you know what those matchups look like. So again, this is Unlikely Heroes version of the build, and congrats for their win rather with Nami. And then next up we do have 2 copies of Bonney. So we have Card Ape as well and as Venera winning their respective tournaments as well. And I think Bonney is the best green leader that we've gotten in a long time, right? We did have, like, for example, Stardeck Kid at the release. I think it was a generically good card, if not like the best leader in the format in set 1. And then we also do have like Uta that popped up earlier this year, which was good, but it wasn't necessarily a green deck. It was more like a film deck that just happened to be green, since it did have to run so many of that package. So for like a generic green leader, it wasn't really until we got Bonney back that that we got that generic sense. So the fact that we don't really have any deck building constrictions with this is very good. And there's a lot of just good green cards that have been popping up in the last couple sets that really don't have like a home generically, because again, green hasn't really had a really good spot in this meta. So with these builds in general, I think there's a consensus of like what the top end cards could look like. For example, we do get a good amount of like the Cavendish, which I mentioned for the Law, but I think most people are playing Hody Jones at 4 copies. Since we're a 5 life leader, like taking the card out of our life for Hodys is not too impactful. You can go for the game against a lot of decks if you're able to hit them down to 0 quick enough. Even if they play 2 blockers, they're not going to be able to Hody can just rest both of them and you can attack with something else that's big on the board kind of thing. So I think that's a very good finisher. Useless Kid, you probably already know about this guy. Our 9-drop Zoros, as well as our Dofis, and just the rest of it there. So I think this that we have some different ways to build this too. Like green is open-ended. There's just some staples that we want to run is because of like the Supernova package, for example, Cavendish, Rouge, and like our 6-cost Basil. But you can be more of like the Supernova, kind of like I'd say vanilla package like we see here from Card Ape. And then also we do have Venera's version of it, which is a little bit more of like the Donquixote package. So since that package is pretty generic too, we have like Dellinger, which is like a worse copy of Rouge, but it's also searchable. We have our Dofi as our top end, which is searchable off the Baby 5, and just a lot of that kind of value for the deck too. So I'm looking forward to seeing more Bonney lists in the next couple weeks. I think the deck is strong, and it's going to be doing a pretty good amount in this meta as well. So congratulations to Card Ape and Venera for winning their respective store championships, or store regionals rather. All right, next up we've got Perona. So this is Seraphim's second place list from the core one, and man, this was such a fun list to see games from. I had a really good time commentating their matches and seeing what was going on. But this is the Wano build of Perona, which I think has been getting pretty popular in this meta. My only issue with this is that it has a lot of ways to draw cards with the Otama and the Momo, but it also has like the negative where you are bottom decking a lot of your top end, right? All of our 8 costs and 9 costs Stussy are not Wano cards, which means that if we're using Momo and our Tama, we're just bottom decking the best cards for us in the late game. We're only getting like that early game value from it. So I think that's something that's impactful for the list that you do have to be a little bit cognizant from. But we do get like some hard draw from the You Can Be My Samurai, which is really good to get that additional draw too. We have like Sabo that can cycle, right? We have the Hiyori, which can cycle. So I think it does make up for it, but it is something you have to be kind of cognizant for this deck. But this deck is also really good at setting up your 8-drop kids, because you can do something where you can play like a Rosie off of it, which is really nice for protection, and then you can play Sabo the next turn, which is such a good blocker that gives the protection for the 8-drop kid. Like unless you're playing against like blue, or you're playing against, I guess, like strictly like an 8-drop Katakuri, your Eustace Kid's probably just going to win you the game after this spot. So I think that Perona is one of the better leaders to play defend the 8-drop kid, and there's a lot of different decks that just lose to this guy still, or a lot of situations where he can kind of put you in a checkmate kind of situation. So you can also do like some silly things where you play a 2-drop Rosie, they use it for the defense, sure, and then you can play Moria afterwards to revive the Rosie to get the protection again for your 8-drop kid, and then and like another value off like Ryuma or something like that. So I really like Perona in this meta. It's been getting a lot of value, and I think it's very strong, and I'm happy to see that it's still doing very well as well. So this is the build here. Congratulations to Seraphim for second place with Perona. And the next up we've got Rob Lucci. So this is Richard's version of the build here, and it's got some unique ads. The biggest unique ad I would say is the Laboon from EB01. This is an activate main. You can rest this character, give one of your opponent's characters -4 cost during this turn. So it can activate as like another way to get some good removal. It is also a 4 cost, so it's something you can play off our Gecko Moria, even like I think there's some times when I've been playing this deck in general where I just don't have really anything to do on 4 Dawn, right? Like we normally don't want to play like a Rebecca because we don't have anything in our trash yet. We don't have like maybe we play like a Brook if there's like a good removal for it, but we don't want to play a Rob Lucci because generically our trash isn't big enough, or there's not cards that we really want to hit with this either. So because of that, I think Laboon is like another card just to kind of set up our some removal is really interesting, and then from there it's more of like the standard list for Rob Lucci. We do have our top end of Moria, Isho, and also the Saba. We have our Tempest and Aegis Lobby, but just so much different, so many different cards that we can use for our removal. I think is very, very strong for this deck. So it's I think like the strongest deck in the game when it comes to cost reduction, and it gets rid of a lot of different cards because of that too. So I don't have much more to say, but congratulations to Richard for their finish with the Rob Lucci. And then next up we've got Enel. So this is Imperius's version of the deck, and I at the beginning of this meta said that Enel is probably the strongest deck in my mind. I think it's starting to already get a little bit less strong, and mostly the fact that if your opponent doesn't know how to play against this deck, you get a lot of free value from it. But as we get farther and farther into this meta, I think more and more people will kind of figure out the ways to beat Enel for this one. But for this build in specific, because I do think we do have a really good top end of our Ace, our Yamato, our Katakuri, and our 7-cost Enel. We are playing 2 copies of Espira, which I've been a fan of this card, just because like it's a generically just okay card, right? Like if we're at 6 Dawn, it's a 6-drop 8k, unless we're playing against black. There's just like a lot of ways like your opponent has to spend a lot of resources to get rid of this card, which means on a turn that generally we weren't doing anything anyways, right? Like maybe Gadatsu if they had something to pop, but otherwise being able to establish this feels a little bit better. And when we're already just playing so many tall bodies, it just means that it's another one that they have to waste resources for. And if they do use it to get rid of Espira, it means that one of our other bodies have a higher chance of sticking too. So other than that, I think this is a pretty standard build. We do know generically what this deck looks like, and I think Enel is going to be pretty present for this meta still. So this is the build here from Imperius, and congrats for their top with Enel. And then 3 more decks we're going to start off with, and all of these are from the core event as well. We've got PicanteJosey's version of the Black Yellow Luffy, and this is still I think one of my favorite decks in this meta. It's a little bit tricky to still get the value from, and it's really particular on how you play. I also will say that it has probably the most polarizing matchups of a deck, at least that I consider in the top 5 from this, because you do have like some hard counters to like the Rob Lucci and people who are playing Moria, which they do exist, but you do also lose pretty hard to blue or any other card that can, or color that can really get rid of our 5-cost Saba or interact with it. So that it means like bomb decking it with blue. That means like using green to just rest it so it's not a blocker anymore. I think all those are just very impactful for this deck. So but otherwise there's just so much value that you get from Luffy. If you're able to just repeat and play these 8-drop Morias, you get so much value, especially when there used to be kind of this thing like on your second Moria, like you started losing value because you only get 5 cards on board and you have to kind of replace cards for it. But for what I've been doing is that you can just like use Luffy, and even if you don't have anything to pop, being able to use this card to draw another card and have like another defense card for us is really nice for you, and it gets a lot of value. So because eventually like I feel like late game for Luffy at times, if you're able to play like two or three Morias on the board by itself is usually enough of a win condition for you to win the game. So for you to be able to stall out, get some card draw, and be a continuous 9k leader with 5 or 6 cards in hand and like a Saba blocker out, your opponent's not going to really be able to do anything in those scenarios, and just kind of wait until you're done building your board and then just kind of go for game. So other than that, I do like the addition of Ice Age because it does work really well with our 5-cost Luffy. We do have a couple copies of Ace, as I think it's the weakest of the brothers right now, and then also 2 copies of the 3-cost Emporio, which I do think that there are some weird turns where you need to go down to the right amount of life, and this is a card that can not only be a blocker, which means you can play it, you can put a Saba 5-cost, use a 2-cost to go into it, and then you have 2 blockers that can't be KO'd, which is really strong. But it's a fine ad. I think it's an okay ad for this deck too. So I don't really have anything else for this one. I think this is a strong deck, and I do think it's a little unfortunate that it's very matchup dependent. There's just so many matchups where it's like, okay, this is really easy for me, or this is really hard for me, and conversely, it's just it's a little bit deterministic. But I do think it's very complex to play at a high level, and it does reward players who are able to lock in on that too. So this is Picante's version of it, and congratulations for their finish there. The next up, we've got Red Purple Law, which is a little bit late into this video, right? We're approaching probably like the 20-minute timestamp for this one, and to not mention Red Purple Law is maybe a bit surprising, since I think going into this meta, I think a lot of people, I had so many people asking me, like, when am I going to be making videos saying that Red Purple Law needs to be hit or something needs to happen for it. And I know that it's been doing pretty good in OP08, all things considered, but in this meta, I have not seen it, and I don't think I'm going to really see it for this meta based on these first couple weeks. So I do think it's a very strong deck, and I think the biggest issue with this deck is the consistency of it. We don't really have great ways to consistently see the cards that we need. We don't have a lot of cycle, especially compared to a lot of other decks, and we really are dependent on like the top 10 cards of our deck. Now, if they are the 10 cards that we happen to need for the situation that we find ourselves, yeah, Red Purple Law is unbeatable. I won't deny that, but you are so dependent on seeing cards like your Reiju to be able to draw more cards like your other Reijus or your 5-drop kids, and if those get answered, you really don't, you kind of run out of steam pretty quickly in a lot of situations. So I think this is a really strong deck, and I do like the ads of like the one of Chopper, right? We've been seeing more copies of Zorojuro coming up as well, since it's a little bit easier for a 3-cost body to stick, with Great Eruption being banned and Sakazuki being banned as well, which I think is great. And then and that's kind of like the big ad. I think we've been seeing like some copies of the 4-cost Law too, but in general, I think this deck is good as well. But you do have to be, you will win a lot of games with this deck, and it's not your fault as Red Purple Law, which I think is a little frustrating for some people, but it is a bit of a challenge for, like, if you have like a medium hand, like how do you get there? How do you get to the end? And again, this deck also at the same time can feel very unbeatable if they have the really good cards. So I don't have much more to say, but this is Echo's version of the build, and congratulations for their finish there. And then to wrap it up, we do have a version of Dofi. This is Yuna's version of it, and I think Dofi's in a pretty good spot. I would say it's generically the best blue leader in this game right now. We do have a good amount of Warlord leaders with the Boa coming out, and I do like Boa as like a concept, but in execution, I think Dofi is just better in more situations, mostly because it is able to put a lot of pressure early game. And the most success that I find with this deck is if I'm able to establish a couple bodies on board, and then spend the rest of the next couple turns using cards like Raging Tiger, Red Rock, Mihawk, any of these cards to make it so whatever they played last turn I get to remove. Sure, I spent my entire turn to do so, but then I can, pressure with my Weevil, my Jinbei, and my leader while also removing cards on your board. So that's generically the power I've been finding out of this deck. We do have some additional spice of having 3 copies of Pudding. Maybe this isn't spice, but like this card is really, really good in a lot of matchups. We do have the Boa, which is a 7 Warlords, which is good. Even though we're not playing the Searcher for the 7 Warlords, this does help us in essentially like stunning a card and getting some weird removal cards at times. And then also the 9-drop Sanji, which is actually spice. It's a little bit difficult to pull this card off, but being able to play 2 bodies off, it's really good. Obviously being able to play like Mihawk's great. I think Boa is great. Even like Jinbei and like Sanji and a Jinbei and a Weevil is also very good. So it's a little bit too cheese for me when I've been testing with it, but I do respect that when it goes off, it's very, very strong. And we do have some ways to set up the top of our decks with like our Perona and our Donquixote Doflamingo. So anyways, I don't really have much more to say about this deck. I think it's in a good spot right now. And congratulations to Yuna for their finish there. So that's all the decks we're going to go over today. We have a lot of other ones we could be going over as well. But if you guys want to check them out, you can check out my website again, eggmanevents.com. And that's going to be it for this one. So if you've made it to this far in the video, you probably like my content in some regard. So please make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really would appreciate it. Make sure to check out my tournament. It's going to be this Sunday. And I'll catch you all next time.